Great, great guys. Welcome everybody back to the most viewed live stream on YouTube about Slavoj Zizek book. Sorry for the absence, I've been busy cruising through the chapter 3 and the appendixes after the chapter 3, which were kinda interesting, but we're gonna dive directly into the start of the chapter 3. Just as a brief recap, we finished the Pascalian Weger, which closes the chapter 2 of this book. And as we saw in the Pascalian Weger, Zizek is cruising further and further away from the starting topic of freedom, and he actually reminds us of that by saying, like, did we not regress to a crazy mixture of Gnosticism and Hegelian speculation, ending up in a topic of the absolute, which is clearly out of the place in our post-Hegelian universe? So he provocatively admits that he's like going out of track, out of content, out of topic, but nonetheless, he doesn't give a shit because it's his book and he wants to talk about whatever thing he feels. Of course, surely there is a deep interconnection between the notion of freedom and what furthermore we're gonna see as the concept of Hegelian absolute, but you get this vibe of him, like you read this book and you say, like, but wasn't he talking about freedom the first like three lines ago, and now he's talking about the absolute? How come this sudden jump? So this is Zizekian style, apparently. Anyways, in this chapter we are going to talk about the Hegelian notion of the absolute, which is the first time I'm encountering. I have heard of Hegel, but I've never like read any of his books. So, but I must say it's interesting. Like, so was Hegel not the last one who dared to talk about the absolute in this way? But in what precise sense did he talk about the absolute? So, since Zizek is also an Hegelian, and part of his philosophy is taken from the German philosopher, he wants us to have a dive with him inside of the Hegelian universe. So Hegel's basic claim had three components. The first is the claim that a priori knowledge of the world, the ordinary spatio-temporal world, is possible. So far so good. You know, you can know the empirical world. You can have an interaction with it, you can understand it, you can know it. Knowledge about the world, but achieved independently of empirical experience. So this is already getting trickier than the first statement. What does exactly independently of empirical experience knowledge of the world actually means? It means that we don't really need the world to know the world. Why so? The second component, and now if he answers about my questions in this second part, in this second component, the second component is the claim that this a priori knowledge consists in thinking's or reason's knowledge of itself. So thinking is actually the way from the Hegelian standpoint from which a subject interacts with the world. Therefore the notion idealism, everything is coming from our thought process and the awareness of our thought process. So thinking that you are thinking and being aware of this thinking lets you connect with the empirical world. So necessary for thought to have determinate objective content, an enterprise that at the same time specifies the determinations inherent in the possible determinacy of being itself. So this, I think that Hegel, I mean, I had to read this passage many times in order to get a, like, I don't know, slight grasp of it. But I am supposing that Hegel sees in our capacity of thinking a true way of, like, I don't know how to say, unraveling, like taking out, like like it's a revelation process of reality layer by layer. And it's not even that linear, because layers are not necessarily one beneath each other, but by our thinking and by the way we structure it, we are able to access the logic inside the tissue of reality, the structure beneath it, which eventually leads to the truth in the Hegelian standpoint. That means it is a metaphysics. So thinking is a metaphysics, is above the empirical world itself. And it's a metaphysic of thinking and being. It is a knowledge of any intelligible reality, the only kind that there is. Inevitably, the only reality that we are having contact with, it's the intelligible one, regardless whether we are thinking about it or not. It is a revival of the great principle of classical philosophy. To be is to be intelligible. Thinking's knowledge of itself is knowing what could be intelligible and therewith a knowledge of what could be. The generative potential of thinking in these 3 lines of text. This is what, in my opinion, we should internalize. This potential that lies inside our capacity of thinking. So let's go more. So sum ergo cogito. Cogito ergo sum, the Cartesian logical deduction, from the Hegelian standpoint becomes sum ergo cogito. But the fact that you're already saying sum, which is a Latinism for I am, already arrows you back to the cogito. Because whenever you're saying I am, you're thinking that you are, and in a way, in logic, this should be wrong, because from cogito, from thinking, if you follow the way of this logical structure, sum ergo cogito, from cogito you cannot go back to, from thinking you cannot go back to I am. You cannot go back to sum. The fact that in this specific formula this is true proves, in my opinion, the brilliance of it, because it's a continuous, never-ending circle of awareness. So that I am is already a statement within the space of thinking. That is to say, only a thinking being can say I am, sum ergo cogito. Again. So can say quantum mechanics still be fully covered by Hegel's matrix of all possible thoughts, determination? So Hegel reversals of Kant is much more refined and radical. Kant's position is that the intractable thing that resists our cognitive grasp is reality in itself, while thinking can clearly analyze itself and bring out its own immanent structure. So Kant, contrary to Hegel, is seeing thinking and reality as two separate and different identities. And the latter one is the one which is not fully intelligible because of its inherent fallacies, while from Kant the thinking is pure and like accessible in its entirety. So antinomies and inconsistencies only arise when thinking is applied to reality beyond the scope of our experience. So this is Kant's point of view of thinking, but Hegel's position is that inconsistencies and contradictions are immanent to thinking, so that they emerge already when thinking tries to think itself. Its own immanent structure, our thinking reaches reality precisely because its immanent contradictions mirror contradiction in or of reality itself. And this is brilliant in my opinion. This is a perfect way to go around the Kantian version of knowledge, thinking and empirical reality. Kant, like Hegel, basically says, well, I mean, the thing is that not just because reality has fallacies, this means that our thinking cannot understand it, cannot create it, cannot know it. Maybe since our thinking is the original idea behind reality, it mirrors reality itself having inconsistency also. So it's just like a specular image, thinking and reality from the Hegelian standpoint. So the failure of thinking to grasp reality is immanent to reality itself. Does the talk about the absolute in such direct way as Hegel practices as the topic of fully rational analysis not belong to another era? Doesn't it belong to a modern time in which we don't actually really know what are the consequences, what are the true consequences of our thinking? What are the ambivalences, the antinomies, the contradictions that arises from our thinking? And the era, as Zizek states here, in which was dealt a mortal blow with the rise of modern empirical sciences and secular societies, isn't actually Hegel talking about this kind of thinking, the thinking that, as I said before, belongs to such a contradictive era that has far surpassed the positivism of the, 19th century, 18th century. For Hegel, however, the minimal determination of the absolute is self-relating, and here it gets messy. An entity which never simply and directly interacts with its environment, it reflexively determines itself the mode of this interaction, the mode of how it is determined by its others. So it's not just a linear interaction, it's not just that just reality appear to the person who is experiencing it. Reality, like thinking's thinking of itself, interact with itself, and afterwards this mediation that reality has with itself, it reaches the observer, it reaches the subjectivity. This, incidentally, is also the minimal determination of freedom. This is the minimal way of reality interacting with each other before interacting with a subjectivity. This is the minimal procedure. And Zizek states that this is also the minimal procedure by which reality interacts with itself and with the subjectivity. I am free if I minimally determine the conditions of my interaction with my environment. So if I minimally self-relate with myself before interacting with the environment. That's why life is the basic form of freedom. A living organism constructs its own environment, it selects part of the environment with which it interacts. That's why, in a living organism, the way I relate to one another is always also a way I relate to myself. I search for food because I need to survive, I search for mate because I need to procreate, and so on and so on. What this means is that as a living organism, I'm not just myself in my flat presence. Reality is not just itself in its flat presence, but reality and myself we simultaneously appear to each other in a certain mode before releasing ourselves into the external, which is created by ourselves. This is just my thinking. Like, given the fact that Hegel thinks that thinking is able to have a know, because knowledge is not creation, effectively. So I might be mistaken here, but still, it's kind of interesting. Like, I think it's interesting the fact that Hegel says we basically have the potential of reaching the knowledge of reality, the secret of reality, because of our thinking nature. This is fascinating. I mean, a bit too optimist, in my opinion. So that's the way. That's the reason why, like before Zizek said, is Hegel's perspective applicable to the confusion made by quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics appears to be unintelligible. He will talk later about quantum mechanics, but the thing is that from the Hegelian standpoint, quantum mechanics reflects, it's just basically the quintessence, like the best example that reflects the contradicting aspect of nature, in the sense that Kant said, well, thinking can reach itself because it's pure or whatever, but cannot reach reality because reality is full of inconsistencies and contradictions. Hegel says that thinking is reality, thinking is the knowledge of reality itself in an identity, like equal thinking, equal knowledge of reality. And regarding to quantum mechanics, knowledge, it's like Hegel said, it's as if from the Hegelian perspective we would say, well, we cannot fully grasp quantum mechanics because that's the way it's supposed to be. Like, that's the way, the contradictions that emerges whenever we try to determine whether the wave collapses, when the wave collapses into a particle or whatever, when we try to, trick the wavelength, the wave function into going into a slit or another. It's inherent. That's already knowledge itself. There is not a beneath. Anyways, I don't know whether I made myself clear, but I do think it's fascinating, because it's as Zizek has multiple times highlighted when talking about Hegel in some of his videos I've watched. Hegel is, although he might be in love with a linear perspective of progress, he is open to contingencies, like more than Marx, in my opinion. Marx was depicting the inevitability of the class struggle and the rise of the proletarian as if it's like a somehow inevitable process, while still, by evaluating surgically the capitalist situation of his days, but Hegel was really like, you know, this is the thing. We take it as it. We take it as it is. We take it as we know it as it is. Well, whatever. Let's continue. So this is why the absolute is not the true in itself beyond objective reality. To arrive at the absolute, what one has to add to the objective order is its appearance itself. One has to grasp how the subjective appearances and illusions of a thing that blur and misrepresents it are a moment of this thing itself. It's necessary moment. We arrive at the absolute standpoint when we grasp how, if we subtract from a thing its illusory appearance, if we try to grasp a thing as it really is in itself, this thing itself disintegrates. So the absolute standpoint also encompasses its misconceptions, without which it wouldn't be absolute. So the misconceptions, the antinomies, the false images are immanent to the absolute itself. It's not that they are external to the absolute and antagonistic towards the absolute. No, we don't have to fight. We don't have to fight the antinomies and contradictions in order, as if they were obstacles, in order to reach the absolute standpoint and have a clear perspective of the reality it represents. We should do exactly the opposite, which is allow these contradictions and misconceptions to be part of the absolute and to represent, although false, represent a perspective of it. It's interesting. It's fascinating. I love this. In this sense, as Hegel repeats again and again, the absolute is the unity of the objective and the subjective. It is the objective order which includes its subjective misrepresentations. Is, however, such a notion of the unity of the objective and the subjective enough to overcome being caught in a transcendental horizon? In the move from Kant to Hegel, we admit that our knowledge, when it tries to understand reality, gets involved in insoluble antinomies and paradoxes. But we then transpose these epistemological obstacles into reality itself. Epistemological means, for those who might not know it, like related to knowledge. So we transpose this obstacle related to knowledge into reality itself. As it happens exemplarily from quantum mechanics, X is simultaneously particle and wave, and Marxism. So, but again, is this ontology? Mamma mia! Sorry, my Italian slipped into this live. This is a difficult term. But again, is this ontology? I would pronounce it by the Italian pronunciation, but I don't think it's correct. Ontologization of epistemological antinomies and obstacle enough. So Zizek is basically saying, is the structure created by Hegel enough to encompass reality, enough to encompass the knowledge of reality, like the concept of knowing reality? Is it a function? Is this approach enough to describe the knowledge and the attempts of knowing reality? Or is there also an unconscious mental process? Is there something beneath knowledge, above, beneath, sideways, whatever? And what is the ontological status of this unconscious, if there is indeed one? It is not that of a purely virtual symbolic order, of a pure logical presupposition. Isn't it something that we are basically inventing and comes from a presupposed symbolic order, this notion, Freudian notions of the unconscious, something that resists the grasp of our knowledge? Schelling deployed the notion of the primordial decision, differentiation, the unconscious atemporal deed by means of which the subject chooses his/her eternal character. So that's the answer of Schelling. There is something which we eventually choose that determines us, but we are not aware of, which would be unconscious, like the Freudian equivalent of the unconscious, which afterwards, within his/her conscious temporal life, she or he experiences as the inexorable necessity, the way she always was. This is Schelling's standpoint. Its status is that of a pure presupposition, of something which always already took place. In other words, it is the paradox of a passive decision, of passively assuming the decision that grounds our being as the supreme act of freedom. The paradox of the highest free choice, which consists in assuming that one is chosen. The paradox, let's reread it. The paradox of the highest free choice of assuming we are chosen, of assuming we have no choice. So I am freely choosing to suppose we have no choice. That's a paradox. You know, how could you possibly freely decide that you don't have, if you are free, like you wouldn't be able, if you are free, let me think, if you're not free, you wouldn't be able to notice that you're not free, because it's a logical presupposition of not freedom. But how can you possibly say that you are chosen, which is you are not free, when you are free? So, I don't think I'm making myself clear, but regardless. Whatever, guys, whatever. I just felt I wanted to continue my journey into this book. I don't know whether I will complete it, but we will see about that, guys. Let's see. In psychoanalytic terms, this choice is that of the fundamental fantasy, of the basic frame matrix which provides the coordinates of the subject's entire universe of meaning. So, above this paradox, we build our reality. Although I am never outside it, although this fantasy is always already here, this fantasy of being free, the fantasy of being free and at the same time being chosen, I have to presuppose myself as the one who posited it, as if it depends on me. I have to presuppose myself as the one who posited it. The link with Freud's notion of an unconscious decision is clear here. This absolute beginning is never made in the present. That is to say, its status is that of a pure presupposition, of something which always already took place. The topic of radical evil, from Kant to Schelling, is an attempt to solve the enigma of how it is that we hold an evil person responsible for his deeds. Kant and Schelling postulate a non-phenomenal transcendental atemporal, non-phenomenal transcendental atemporal act of primordial choice. by means of which each of us, prior to his temporal bodily existence, chooses his external character. My man, you've already told us this. Please, tell us something new. This act of choice is experienced as an imposed necessity, which means that the subject, in his phenomenal self-awareness, is not conscious of the free choice which grounds his character. That is to say, this act is radically unconscious. In his detailed analysis of evil, Kant is compelled to distinguish between ordinary evil, the violation of morality on behalf of some pathological motivations, like greed, lust, and ambition, radical evil, and diabolical evil. It might seem that we are dealing with a simple linear graduation: normal evil, more radical evil, and finally the unthinkable diabolical evil. However, Kant confuses different principles of classification. Radical evil does not designate a specific type of evil acts, but an a priori propensity of the human nature, which opens up to the very space for normal evil acts, that is to say, which roots them in human nature. So this is radical evil, normal evil. Radical evil is a logical presupposition that allows normal evil to exist. In contrast to it, diabolical evil does not designate a specific type of evil act. Acts which are not motivated by any pathological motivations but are done just for the sake of it, elevating evil itself into an a priori non-pathological motivation. For Kant, true freedom lies whether you are doing something for non-pathological reasons. And for Kant, pathological reasons are reasons which are dictated by drive. It's not to be intended into the strictly clinical sense. It might be, it's not wrong to intend it in such a way, but as far as I understood, Kant sees pathological as drive. When I want to do something, I want to train, then my man, you are pathological. You are not free. I want to do something because I cannot live without it. I cannot not do it. That's freedom. That's non-pathological. That's grounded in your being. That's something you cannot run away from. That's freedom. It's a paradox. I know it's a paradox, but I mean it makes sense. It makes sense. I think that nowadays I don't want to be too, I don't know how to say. In Italy we say qualunquista. Qualunquista, it means like talking about everything and nothing. But I just want to say that in our society we kind of get overwhelmed with inputs, and to the point of which we truly don't know what we want from ourselves. And whenever we know that we want something, whenever we get into this constant rational struggle in which we genuinely question whether what we are doing has some sense or not. But I get what this text is saying, because before I was having a picnic in the park, and when I was walking towards my place, I was exactly thinking, like, I cannot avoid myself, I cannot exempt myself from doing this video. And this kind of sensation, this kind of, let's call it obsession, something that you cannot not do, inside of itself as the deed of freedom. Well, if he were to assert the actual possibility, I mean, then Zizek doesn't agree with this diabolical version of evil, of course, because Zizek has always to state the affirmative, oppose the affirmative and state the contrary. if he were to assess the actual possibility of diabolical evil, he would find it impossible to distinguish it from the good, because it's away from the ethical dimension, if it's non-pathological. Since both acts would be non-pathologically motivated. Yeah. The travesty of justice would become indistinguishable from justice itself. How do we hold accountable a person who has committed a crime? We assume that it has free will, under which he has done whatever he did. Let's suppose a society, this is the finish of this chapter, but I wanna just wonder about a society which allows this kind of thinking into its regulative structure. Wouldn't it be an extremely rational society? Like as if the law all of a sudden admitted that, well, you're going to prison. You're going to prison, of course, because you are a potential threat to the order that we collectively have established towards centuries of domination and maintenance, order and maintenance. But we just want you to know, as every other citizens know, that you are not free, and that eventually this was inevitable. So don't how would you say? Don't whip yourself too much over this sentence, but still, we want you to suffer from it. I don't know, it's just I'm just imagining the public conversation, the public, maybe I'm just giantly misinterpreting this, but I just want to imagine the public, from the media, which are discussing people that have committed atrocities, specifying this a priori presupposition concerning our free will. Wouldn't it just wipe away and in somehow justify the atrocity that supposed person, people, group, whatever has done? Maybe. Anyways, we finished for today's, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to like, comment, share. I'm waiting for the first comment. I don't want to seem like I'm begging for such a thing. I will gladly like to have a conversation with one of you, whether you find this content stimulating, but at the end of the day, I really do it for the sake of doing it, because I have this non-pathological drive inside of myself, something that I cannot help to avoid. And I hope you too find what you cannot help yourself to avoid, and follow it till the end. This is eventually the reason why, in my opinion, we are here, to find this drive, this pure drive, embedded in reality, that it's waiting to self-relate with and resonate inside of our person. Have a nice day, and